What can you do when you have the same mistake happening over and over again? You've already told your team members, you've already asked them to do something, and still it's the same mistakes keep happening over and over again. And of course, you want to prevent that from happening. So, what is it that you can do? That's exactly what we're going to be covering today. Today, we're talking about Poka Yoke. So, this is the last wave in our series about lean team management. Lean team management is essentially using lean management tools, very practical and specific tools that come from lean management, and using them in your team, with your team, to manage your team, to increase your performance. So we've talked about a lot of different things to help you identify areas of waste, to identify how you can increase your productivity, how can you find the root causes of some of the issues that you're having. And today, this is the last wave of the series of 5 different waves when we're talking about lean management tools used for team management. And this is the final one. So if you haven't watched, if you haven't been through the other waves, then I do recommend that you go through them before, because obviously here we're talking about fixing mistakes. However, if you're fixing mistakes at a superficial level, if you didn't discover the root cause, then that's not going to be sustainable in the long run. So go over the other ones, find out what's really causing your performance issues, and then come back here so that we can really find solutions to prevent those mistakes from happening again. So what is a Poka Yoka? Essentially, this is literally proofing for mistakes. So preventing mistakes from happening. So for example, here on this road, you have a roadblock. That already prevents the cars from getting there. So the idea here is that you identify the root cause. Where is it that your problem is starting? And then finding a solution that works on the root level. If you remember, we had a tree before, and we talked about how sometimes we have problems like here on a surface level, and then we have to go deeper and really understand that the reason for the problems that we see here on this more superficial level is actually sometimes things that are going on inside the tree, right, that we can't really see, and even down here. So it really is important that we understand what is the root cause for the symptoms that we are seeing. So once you've done that, then you want to create a Poka Yoka, not here on the symptom that you see, but here on the root cause. So for example, let's say that on this road, let's say that it has a hole here, and that's why it's closed. Because obviously, if you don't close it, then cars will go there and they will fall into the hole, so you'll have more accidents. So a Poka Yoka is a system, it's something that prevents you from going in the wrong direction, prevents you from even starting on the way of making a mistake. In this case, it prevents you from going onto the street. So for sure, you're not going to fall into the hole. Especially if this is on a crossroad, let's say, then you already know at the beginning, so you don't even get into here. You find another option and you go to another road. So the mistake is prevented, not when it happens, but way before. In the moment that you start to shift a little bit towards that way that is going to make you have the mistake. So how is that going to work for you in the context of people management? So it might be that you have a process that is not working properly, and we talked about processes before, so I'm going to leave the links below for those waves about processes so that you can go over it. So there might be something on your process or along the way that makes you fall into a mistake. So let's take the example of a process. So you're doing a process, and let's say that there's not enough quality. So you have a process that you're doing, and then suddenly like there's a breach of quality, but you continue doing it like with a very bad quality. And obviously you don't want to do that. So what you want to do is to understand where is the moment where this quality breaks, where is the moment where we start going in a way that doesn't have that much quality. So for example, for software development, it ties back to coding standards. If you have them, and if you don't have them, and if you have them, which coding standards do you have? That might be affecting the quality of your software. Also, the software architecture, that is also something that might influence the quality of your output. So that might be something that you want to look into. When it comes to really people management questions, so for example, let's say that you have a situation where one specific person in your team or more people in your team they are communicating in a way that comes across as rude, or that they are getting upset, so they're getting quite emotional about a certain topic or certain types of discussions. So what we need to do is that, obviously with that person, because we can't figure out everything by ourselves, right? We need to also have other people and their input. We're going to identify where is the moment where that triggers. So for example, you can actually sit down with someone and say, look, when we're discussing these kind of topics, I've noticed that you tend to feel a little bit more emotional about it, or that you tend to, your energy tends to rise, and sometimes you tend to communicate in a way that comes across as aggressive, even though you don't mean it. It comes across like that. So let's pinpoint where is the moment where that starts to happen. And for example, in aggressive communication, you might see that it's either because someone raises the voice, so they speak louder. It might be that someone just snaps at someone else. So like they snap, so they build up like the frustration, and then suddenly they snap. So build up, that's where it starts, right? So the snapping is the symptom, but there's a build up behind it. So when you identify these things, then you can find solutions. So again, I'm going to leave the links down below for the ways where we talked about the 5 whys, and about the spaghetti diagram, about the Ishikawa diagram, and about the different types of waste, because these are the things that are going to really help you to understand the root causes. And the Poka Yoka only works for the root causes. You might also use it for the symptoms, but you're not going to solve anything. So, for example, here you have an emotion building up, right? So even if this is for you personally, or for someone else, then you can look at, okay, so what are the Poka Yokas that we can do to prevent that from happening, to prevent the build-up to turn into snapping at someone else. And then you look for solutions, and you decide on what is the solution that you want to implement. So for example, here with the build-up, or with raising the voice, this is like something, actually raise the voice is also like more of a symptom. So there's an emotion or a frustration building up. So what is it that we can do? Maybe this is someone who keeps things more for themselves, and then they only express it when they already have like an emotional build-up. So one of the things that you can do here is that you start with their opinion. So you start with them. So when you're discussing something, you start with them. And this way they get a way to express themselves without having that build-up. So this could be one example. Another way for you to understand, for you to use this, is also to understand, where does the build-up come from? Is it because you have like different ways of seeing things? Is it because you have different ways of working? Is it like a specific behavior? What is the trigger for that symptom to develop? And then you develop a Poke Yoka. So for example, let's say that you have different communication channels. You have some people who use email, some people who use Slack, some people who use, other platforms to communicate, and your communication is, scattered over all of these things. And you've decided together that you are only going to use Slack. So what is one of the things that you can do as a Poke Yoka to ensure that people communicate through Slack? So maybe you can redirect, like maybe there's some integration that you can use that puts all of the messages on Slack. Maybe whenever someone sends you an email, you can redirect that to Slack yourself, so that you train the person, and instead of feeding into the wrong channel, you already divert that to the wrong channel. It could also be that you disable communication in some of the channels that you don't want to use for communication. So creating Poke Yokas is like fixing the things at the beginning. Now, you've gone through all of this process of identifying different root causes and different problems, different things that are impacting your team performance in a negative way. And today we're talking about solutions. So let me know, what are the things that you discovered before that are impacting your team performance, and what are potential Poke Yokas that you can do? And this can be obviously for physical things. For in production, there was a really nice story about a production line that they produced toothpaste, and they needed to put the toothpaste in the boxes, and there was some failure that some boxes, they were just in the production line, but the toothpaste wasn't put inside. So Obviously, at the end you have boxes that are coming out of the assembly line and they are empty. So this was one of the defects and they wanted to fix that. So one of the very easy solutions that they had was that they had in one of the how do you say, one of the belts where the products came through. So after they were already put the toothpaste inside the box, they had a fan that was on, and so the fan would blow out all of the boxes that were empty because they were light. So that's an example of a Poke Yoka. It's physical, a physical example. For other processes, you can use other types of things. So for example, you can block certain applications. You can, if you want to have some time that is where you have no interruptions, you can block your time both physically, like close the door of where you're working and say no distractions, disconnect Slack, email, everything for a certain period of time, let everyone else know as well. But that can be a way for you to also have a Poka Yoke to prevent people from coming and interrupting your work for a certain amount of time. So that could be another example as well. So this is the end of our waves about lean team management. I really hope that you got to identify a lot of things that you can improve in your team performance. And let's share what are the Poke Yokas that you are using and how you're using this concept. How are you applying it to your team management so that you can also inspire other people to have different solutions for their own problems as well. I'm sure that whatever you're going through with your team, you're not the only person and you're not the only team going through that. So there are going to be other people who are going through the same situation who might be inspired by your solution. And also, if they share, you might also be inspired by their solution. So let us know what are the solutions that you have. And thank you for being here. Welcome aboard. Join if you haven't joined yet, and I'll catch you on the next wave. Bye.